I did begin with speaking of the personal self, and the apparent way it can be sidestepped. But how on previous shows I had suggested the sneaky nature of the personal self, how it may well manipulate dream environments and cause sabotage to our process of awareness in many creative ways. I had a dream recently where I was once again in my place of boring work. On a previous dream, I had demonstrations of my car suffering damage that prevented my reaching work, and this indicated, in fact, damage to my actual physical vehicle that would occur should I persist with a job that perhaps was becoming far too much a hindrance to my process of becoming more aware. In that dream, it's conceivable that I agreed to self-sabotage of my vehicle as a means to stop my being able to go to work. This would not, of course, be the conception of the personal self, especially if it was a means to become more aware. The personal self may well panic at such a notion and prefer its comfort zones of routine and habit that such things as 9-to-5 jobs afford. But a little compromise may have happened. No, I didn't drop my job entirely, but in recent times I have halved it. I work but 3 days a week now instead of 5. And yes, this has been most beneficial in regards to my process of awareness. I am less exhausted, and my emotional self less stimulated, and thus I can be connected with my awareness and focus on the is to a greater degree. Ultimately, I will move beyond the whole work deal entirely, but I will know when it is the moment to do so. I have an insight where and when this will be. Awareness affords one with a greater ability to step back from the experience and see it more in its entirety, how the pieces fit together, to be totally in the personal self only, or to a greater degree, all we can see are the bricks. Were we to connect more with our real selves, we can see it as a house that the bricks do make. Everything becomes clearer with a more expanded viewpoint and objectivity, to the extent that we no longer need to chase things, force things, or manipulate things into being. We can just be, focus on the is, recognize our real intent and the experiences and process unfolds of its own accord. Whatever we focus on, we will have. All the pieces slot into place, and a linear sequence of events take us where we decide to go. As everything is, everything and every possible position is available now, but because of being disconnected from the real self, we stand then in cause and effect creation, and what we desire then moves along these lines. We seek something, and that ripples out as a cause, with the resulting effect, that of an entire sequence of events, maybe spanning many lifetimes, bringing us what we desire. If we stand real in the NuNowness, we are beyond cause and effect, and so a linear sequence of events no longer has to unfold. If everything is now, if everything is, and we stand in that completely, then what we want simply is. For where else can it be than here and now? To the extent, then, that we don't need or want anything, for everything is, and we stand with that, so we is everything also. And so what can you add to that? It makes no sense to want anything beyond a position of utter being-isness. I actually did have another job-related dream too. I was in my drudgery, and it was so very boring, so boring to the extent that I was willing to do anything to escape it. But in this dream, my personal self could not conceive of being absent of it. Then some controller-type individuals materialized and offered me a deal. My personal self was tempted, but I would not accept that which the controllers offered. A deal made in blood, no doubt, on the bones of others, selling out to the dark forces a guarantee to go down a very restricting cause and effect route indeed, and the journey to the is forfeited. So another way these jobs and such can be an awareness process roadblock. if we fail to heed the real side demonstration suggestions, and the dark forces may step in and take their opportunity. And if we are engrossed in the monotony of our labour, and we are predominantly finding ourselves in our emotional stimulated personal self, we may not see as clearly the tricks, snares, and deceptions for what they are. For me, I'd rather be a homeless person on the streets than get to the stage where my being in my job, even with reduced hours, brings my process of awareness to a grinding halt. In a way, I can see the drawbacks of sharing from a technological basis, the computers and their upkeep, the homes needed to operate them from. Through greater awareness, I might see how I can realistically not be in a job and still share as I do, but not yet at this time. But in saying that, I do foresee how things are unfolding on a large planetary scale, and this position of being in a house with computers and sharing in that capacity is in the short term. There is nothing like a little incentive, a little carrot dangling to keep the personal self in line, to stop it frothing and hissing, moaning and tugging on our real self coattails in oppositional defiance to our process. Recently, I edited a Skype, a Charles show from 2017, and there was a part in that made my personal self snap to attention and take heed. To be with the ears would require us to be in a position of being, and nothing in addition to this. For to add to something that is perfect would bring free will to bear, and that would take us out of alignment with this true reality. To the personal self, this seems very dull. It is incapable of conceiving of anything beyond the psych realms, generally astral physical levels, that it was created within. And so always we must drag the personal self with us, as it digs in its heels in protestation, and if we allow it, it will keep us retained within the confines of creation. But we can be a little tricky too. Our real selves, that is. Dwayne says how he can trick people into being wonderful. He will bring them in with references that may initially appeal to the personal self. For it is always with the personal self that our decision to look at what Dwayne is presenting begins. So something is required to get us in the door. Usually it's the potential and promise of a thrill or other. For me, I always had a personal self-fascination with all things alien, and when I heard some of Dwayne's YouTube clips speaking of meeting these self-proclaimed gods of man and the reptilians, that was my initial personal self-motivation for taking a look at his presentation. I wanted to see aliens, meet reptilians, kick back and have a space beer with a god. It was enough to get me in the door, and then I connected enough with my awareness to stick with it, and the process has unfolded ever since, with a few hiccups along the way, a few falling flat on my face situations, and path veerings naturally. For this we will all experience along the journey. So it transpired when I became set with my real intent and focus enough that I was to stick around, I would have my encounters with reptilians and aliens anyway, even when these no longer were my motivation or objective. And how many encounters I have had, more than I would have imagined, and I am still very much in my infancy where my real awareness is concerned, and what an intrigue that is. Anyway, the part of the Skype I mentioned that had my personal self take notice was where Dwayne mentioned that yes, ultimately the real intent is to reach the ears, but many people can get to the 7th level of the real universes, the first rung as it were, and be beyond creation and the cause and effect reincarnational cycle. Unlike being with the ears, in the 7th level, people can still have their fantasy la-la lands, and yet this will not have them careening back into creation and unconsciously lost again, as they had earned their awareness and have the recognition to be at this level. I must have come across this information before, but it didn't register. But it certainly serves as an incentive for the personal self, the prospect of having anything it wants, and not having to bear karmic consequences. So, in a way, we can trick our personal selves into being wonderful, as effectively as Dwayne tricks people into being wonderful too. And should one then reach the real universes, the 7th level, maybe a little push or two just to get beyond that position, and then be real with the is, and we have our personal created selves drift away. But we do need also incentives to keep from falling back into our personal selves, a little thrill or several on the real side, a little exhilaration or adventure that were we not on our process to the is, we would not have experienced. A little like Peter's flying dreams, nothing like a little breathtaking soaring like a bird to keep one on track to the is. I had a real side dream the other day along these lines. I was on a whole series of adventures with new friends. We were battling this, we were overcoming that. Monsters, dragons, tests and tribulations, as we went through our real side training tests for our awareness, our viewpoints, and a greater strengthening of our recognition of our real intents. The nature of the dream wasn't important, as I didn't experience it in the clarity that facilitated my effectively bringing it back for sharing. Therefore, one can assume that that part of it wasn't important. It was happening, yes, and served the experiential purpose for which it was provided, but my focus was on a particular scene of the experience. Before one of our tests, I was with a new friend, and we were talking, and it was pretty much as you would talk to an individual on the physical, general interaction, but then something changed. As we spoke, it's as though something came over us. A sense of beingness, a fading of our personal selves, an encompassing and delightful blue-gold light did envelop us. There was no further need for words. we were simply in each other's presence, and engulfed in a light, and it was a phenomenal experience, and I took this to be the state described as being to being. I'd never experienced this being to being state before, at least not to this degree. And quite possibly even this wasn't the complete article. It was virtually indescribable. Words fail to afford it justice. Words even cheapen the experience. All I can say is it was being in a state of complete purity, and connecting with another in the same state, being to being. Certainly then, a wonderful experience, and a reminder of what it would be like standing real in the is, being to being, with others in this manner. Always there is more to experience, more to be, a better position to aspire to, and in fact a never-ending expansion into the endlessness of the all is. So who would want to stop at the 7th level only? And even if you did, and played around with the la-la fantasy worlds of your creation, I suggest that would become dull after a while, and the ears would beckon you on into itself further, and I can't imagine an individual resisting that for long, to go forever into the unknown.